Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Ramosi Thurlow scale,
or MOTS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hello there. Welcome back to Lost Signals Discusses Film and Television, and I am your last man standing gunslinger, Scott Thurlow, here with my fellow outlaws, Jonathan Ian Manzer.
El Buono, El Bruto, y El Cattivo.
And Chris Morgan.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Mm-hmm. And longtime friend of us, first-time guest on the show, Sam Motti.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. All right. So, and we're reviewing, as a salute, we promised this, I think, a little bit ago. This is our salute to Ennio Morricone / Spaghetti Westerns, Sergio Leone as well. We are reviewing perhaps what is the quintessential of those films, the good, bad, and the ugly. And I have a logline real quick. Of course, is are you a good and or bad and or ugly enough dude to get the fucking gold? You know, like that's the plot, I would think. And I'll expand upon that. That's, like I said, pretty much the plot. Clint Eastwood plays Blondie / the man with no name, the drifter character from the previous films, who is after he has a partnership with Tuco, which he rescues. He basically, like, Tuco is an outlaw. Blondie's character turns him in at towns and then rescues him, and they split the money. And then they figured out, like, they hear about a buried cache of Confederate gold that they go chase after. And also Lee Van Cleef plays a sort of bounty hunter who has also got caught wind of this. And it's basically a three-way race for them to get to the gold, to find out where it is and get to it first. And they have a big standoff, a very famous standoff at the end. And one of them, they get the gold, like, essentially. So, like, it's a long movie, of course. It's an epic Western. It's, again, like I mentioned, the quintessential, more or less, spaghetti Western Sergio Leone movie. But that's essentially the plot. So if we're going to scores, it's what, Sam? It's like almost 3 hours, like just under 3 hours.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you watch the extended release, that's like 3.5 hours.
That was going to ask you, right? There's different versions of it, right?
Yeah, it's something you almost want to watch in 2 viewings.
Yeah, so, like, given that, like, I was pretty engaged throughout. I thought the plot was, like, fine, solid, like, not complex. It's almost like a proto, of course, like, Tarantino stole from this movie. Guy Ritchie, I would say, a little bit too here and there. But, like, the whole point is just them a race to the gold. And I think it's pretty much engaging throughout. I think there's a couple of nitpicks I could say, like some scenes ran on a little bit too long, maybe in each part, like when we used to do like intro by the conclusion. But I would say like a 0.3 away from each of them, leaving me with a very strong 2 for plot score-wise. So what do you guys think?
Well, this is actually a surprising. This is the first time I've ever seen Good, Bad, and Ugly all the way through. And it shocked me how much it is an action adventure, actually a very classic action adventure. They have the stoic hero. They have the goofy buddy who sometimes in those kind of films are either the villain or the partner, and oftentimes both. And you have the kind of the villain who matches the hero. But what's fascinating about this is it almost follows the goofy supporting character as the main protagonist of this. I think Tuco
is featured quite a bit.
Is the main narrative. And it's interesting. I researched a bit about this, and Sergio Leone wrote a lot of this, and he felt that each of these characters represented a part of him, and that Tuco was the one he felt was the most had the most heart for, in a sense,
spiritual,
and and thus like he's featured the most. But it's interesting because it is really at its heart a standard kind of action adventure flick.
Sure.
So I'm kind of leaning, unless someone has a really good argument for a 3, I'm also leaning towards a 2.
I'm just gonna say that the only part that really lost me is when they got into the Civil War stuff, like when they went to the Yankee camp, and from there, basically up until the bridge, I was kind of like, it was kind of like a mixed bag for me. Yeah, I'm going to give it a very strong 2. It's not a detriment. Sam, to what you said, 2 viewings. I almost did that. I almost watched it last night and then this morning. Instead, I decided to watch it in one felt swoop. And I think I agree with you. I think it would be a great film to watch. And then as soon as they get to the Yankee camp, then, intermission and then go back to it. So right now in one viewing, beginning to end, I'm going to give it a very strong 2.
All right, what do you think, Sam?
I would also give it a very strong 2. It's not a plot-driven movie. This is a character-driven movie. I mean, the movie starts, the first 3 scenes are character intros. Yeah. You're meeting these guys, and it's all about them, and they're all, and yes, and Tuco is, I don't know if he's the protagonist, but he is definitely the most featured. He is the most interesting. He has a brother who is a priest. When they're doing that, one of those scenes where, they're running their scam, they've turned him in and he's going to hang. And they're reading off just the laundry list of crimes that this man has committed. Like, he is definitely the most interesting character. But I agree. It's a solid 2. You're never like, oh, wow. Like, you're never amazed by what's happened with this, the money. It was buried. It's not like any kind of ingenious plot devices going on. It's definitely just a character-driven movie.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And yeah, so I think we're all agreeing upon 2s for plot. So let's move along to themes, and that'll be you, E.
There's a couple of different themes I'm going to be of my rant here. The first that surprised me, this is 1966, and Sergio Leone is a student of history, actually. So it's almost very much in the vein of other films of this time, an anti-war flick, even though it was an Italian work, but it's also an anti-American exceptionalism work in the sense that he wanted to portray the Union as not this. Granted, I'm not talking about motivation behind the war here. I'm talking about the idea of he was frustrated from what I read over the idealization of the Union soldiers and not committing war crimes or and that he was looking to show the absurdity of war and that both sides were shit in the long run on things. But
everyone's an asshole, sure.
But another fascinating part is that, as Sam you brought up, the character-driven work here, the ethics of it. Why is the good the good? Why is Blondie the good? What he's a scammer. He's not this stereotypical John Wayne hero, and that's
not a white hat.
Yeah.
One of the intents that Giuliani was going for as well is to divorce from that throughout the entire Man with No Name series and divorce that John Wayne stereotype to kind of a more moral ambiguity. If anything, actually, Angel Eyes, the bad, is actually in ways the most honest of them. He completes his contracts. Yeah. He goes through the process of becoming an officer for his own purposes, but it seems that like he is in a sense the most in line with the system for his own benefit, where Blondie is more of a roguish type character, and you have Tuco as a to use a D&D term, like a chaotic neutral to evil character. So that morality angle is actually one of the most fascinating parts of this, because it's really exploring like that good doesn't necessarily exist. Good is it's
all gray.
Gray morality area, is that's my opinions.
I totally agree. Especially when that last part you were saying, that reminded me of when Tuco is talking to his brother, who is a priest and clearly and obviously does not approve of Tuco's lifestyle. Tuco says, where we came from, if you didn't want to die poor, you either become a criminal or a priest, and the only reason you didn't become a criminal is you were too much of a coward.
Yeah.
So it's like that kind of like you're pressed. There is no good and bad. There is, you have one bad choice or another bad choice, and depending on what you can hack, that's the direction you're going to go.
But also there's two Union soldier officers who are morally good characters in a sense. One is wounded in bed and unable to control the prison camp he runs, and the other leads his soldiers to death. Like, so the highest level of morality in this is ineffectual.
Ineffective, yeah. No.
And especially what that one captain says. But the one captain says when they're at that battle, and he's talking about the bridge and how he wishes somebody would just blow it up, and he says, "We will all be dust, and that bridge will still stand."
Yeah. No, it's a good line. That goes to dialogue, but you're right. Like, I think it also feeds into themes, as you guys mentioned. I don't know much more. I think that, like, on the surface, of course, the theme of greed. Like, they're all like racing each other. You know, they're trying to, like, you know, out scam each other. Essentially, like, oh, I know one part of the secret, one part of, like, where the treasure map is, essentially, and you know the other. So, trying to wheedle it out of you. But I think that, as you said, Sergio clearly, like, I was on record of saying, like, yeah, I'm trying to comment upon the absurdity of both sides of the Civil War and just, you know, the war commentary in general. And I think it sounds like you guys are giving it a 1. I certainly am. I think it all works on all of those fronts and all of those, like, elements. So what do you think, Chris?
I think any film that critiques whatever American exceptionalism is going to get a 1 from me regardless. I fucking hate that shit.
All right.
But by the same token, I think if the scene between Tuco and his brother were not there, the film would be diminished. It's such an incredible, because that film literally, you know, sometimes when, like, you know, when you're watching, there's always things flowing in and out, they transient in your mind. That scene in particular really, it was so fucking, so much was said in such a little time. And the great thing about that was that it had the setup being like, oh, you know, Tuco's brother's not going to be here till tomorrow. Oh, he's out, blah, blah, blah. Well, he was at their father's funeral. It was just such you walked into it thinking, oh, he's just running an errand. He's a monk. You know, what goodwill mission is he on today? And it was a very personal, very human thing he was on. And the conversation he had with his brother in that moment was just gave such, just whatever you needed to make the humanity grow in the film. I mean, it just radiated from then on out. I'm giving it a very strong 1.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's an incredible character study, and thematically, like I said, that scene to me personally was a linchpin for the film.
It was the redemption of Tuco as a character, because
in a sense, yeah,
he comes off as a scoundrel, but this adds the human element to make him a viable character to follow throughout the work, because it adds that great morality. But I completely agree with you on that.
And he to his own frailties, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately after that scene, there's a redemption of Blondie and Tuco's friendship, because Blondie overhears that conversation you were talking about.
Yep.
And then they get back in the carriage, and Tuco starts bullshitting about, oh, my brother, every time I see my brother, he just won't let me go. And then I think Blondie says something about, like, you know, there's nothing, or Tuco says, my brother will always offer me a bowl of soup. And Blondie says, there's nothing, you know, better after a good hot meal than a cigar. Kind of like saying, like, I know you're full of shit. Here's a cigar, buddy. Like, smoke it off.
Yeah.
And that definitely verbal interaction after that spoke volumes.
Yeah, I agree. That goes like almost like dialogue style, but it seems like we're all giving themes a 1. Yeah. Certainly. So, right, Sam, on to you. Who or what is the antagonist of this film?
The antagonist is definitely, I think, Angel Eyes. He's the first one, because there's the original 3 guys that are going after this gold. There's Baker, Stevens, and Jackson, who eventually renames himself Bill Carson.
Carson, right, yep.
And Angel Eyes is the one who discovers this plot right before he murders Stevens. And then, now that he knows about this money, he murders he murders Baker, although he also has his whole, whenever I'm paid, I always see the job through. So
lawful evil, yeah.
Yeah, but then he's the one when, you know, Tuco and Blondie just kind of accidentally come across this whole money story. Like,
stumble into it. Yeah.
I mean, Tuco has the hammer cocked back on the gun. He's about to shoot Blondie. Blondie's about to die from exposure anyway. And then here comes, the carriage in the desert, which is kind of odd.
Carriage ex machina.
But then after they get caught, Angel Eyes is the one who lets Blondie go. He's the one who tries to send Tuco off to his death, which apparently never works in this movie. And he's the one then again at the very end when Blondie and Tuco are like digging up the graves. He's the one that comes in and forces the Mexican standoff. So he is definitely the antagonist.
I mean, so I agree. Like to one extent, like yes, Sam. Like in corporeal form, Angel Eyes is that. Like he's definitely like stalking them essentially. Like the whole
he is a hunter,
film, right? But like I don't know. Like I want to say like. I'm going to give it a 1 probably for that anyways, but on top of that, I think it ties in, at least my interpretation is, ties into like the greed angle. Like they're all trying to like one up each other in some way to get to the fucking 20 grand or 200 grand, whatever it is, like whatever the gold is worth, the Confederate gold, right? So like it goes to the nature of humanity, but I think that is also like they're antagonized by that. Like they don't, none of them, even Tuco and Blondie, don't necessarily trust each other fully to the extent that you might think they would because of their partnership beforehand. Like there's a really good solo reveal where when they blow up the bridge in the aftermath of the Civil War like battle, where Tuco asks Blondie, he's like, "Tell me the name of the grave," and he tells him the name next to it, right? Like
Arch Stanton.
So, yeah, exactly, right. So I just think like all that stuff like unfolds itself into being like the movie is tense throughout. Like when those scenes happen, like you feel it as the audience, I think. So I think it's both of those fronts, at least for me, and they're both enough to give it a pretty strong, solid 1. So
I love Angel Eyes as a villain here, but the Green-Eyed Devil is also always a fantastic villain. But I've never seen a more appropriately named character than Angel Eyes. He especially in the scenes where he is in control, and whether it is the initial scene where he's at the table with Stevens, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
The opening scene, right? Yeah.
Or he's running he's the Union officer in the prison camp, or in the final, like his eyes, his calm collectedness, it makes a fantastic villain.
The thing I love about Angel Eyes is that he is lawful. Are we gonna say evil? Let's just say, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
The thing is, I love the fact that you've got these 3 characters, and there is just such a slight divide between who these people are. What I loved about it is, if you're going to establish a villain and you're going to establish a world, you're the villain, you set up a paradigm for relative virtue, for lack of a better word. So
it's a great word.
I feel you.
So basically, you've got everybody who's kind of a scoundrel in one area or the other. Yeah, moderating altruism. I mean, it's really. I guess I'll get to this when we get to Tuco later. But I found it was a really interesting way to introduce him, where in a weird way he is the villain, but also he's kind of like the paradigm in this film for honor.
It's a foil.
Well, I mean, because the thing is, it's like you guys said, he has a code he lives by, and he is unwavering in that code.
But think of how that does match up with the themes of the anti-war. He is doing terrible things but he justifies it through his code of honor. So it's like where you have the more individualistic Tuco, who is played off as the idiot, so you kind of forgive him for that, and also the chaotic, good or neutral man with no name. We're using a lot of D&D terms here.
I think it works though.
But like that honor playoff is both thematic and character driven, and I think it works quite well, especially for what he's trying to say.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And there's one other thing I want to say about this, and with regard to the as far as I'm concerned, while the minor character differences might be different, without question, Han Solo fucking shot first. I don't care, because that whole thing with them, I'm like, this is fucking Star Wars, man. And like when he shoots from underneath the table through the bowl, I'm like, yep, Greedo did not shoot first.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. But I was going to wait for it in style, Chris. But so many other things, we'll say, were influenced by this film. That being one of them for sure. But yeah, it looks like we're giving that a 1.
Mhm.
So let's move on to protagonists. Chris, who or what is a protagonist of Good, Bad, Ugly?
Ian kind of fucked things up for me because he made an argument for two.
Never.
This is a really interesting thing because in a lot of ways you are going to want to say Blondie. Tuco definitely, especially now that we're talking about with regard to his brother. I mean, within the first scene for Angel Eyes and for the conversation with his brother, they really established both of those characters. So now I'm wondering if Blondie isn't a protagonist in that he just kind of floats through this, and essentially he is the middle ground between Tuco and Angel Eyes, or if he shares protagonist duties with Tuco, since really it is he who we follow more than anybody. So I'm going to throw this off to you guys because I'm definitely giving it a 1 because I think there could be a case made for Blondie because again, he's a protagonist who kind of gets us into the world, but he doesn't have as much gravitas character-wise, thematically as the other two do. So
What do you think, Sam?
I agree. It's Tuco. There's a scene. I think it's the second time we see Blondie and Tuco trying to pull off their scam, and actually Angel Eyes is there, and he's stepping into a carriage, and some woman says, "Oh God, like that man is so awful," and he says, "Even a filthy beggar has a guardian angel," and then he sees Blondie. He says, "This one has a golden-haired guardian angel," and I think yes, Tuco is the protagonist. And Blondie is his guardian angel. Blondie is the one who tells him a grave in the name, but not the right one, because he knows Tuco is an idiot. He's going to screw this up. He's going to be digging, and then what do you know? Somebody comes up from behind you and throws a shovel, and they have a gun at your back. So I feel like almost like, and then also I feel like Blondie at the end, like he knows, he's like, listen, you're stupid and you're greedy. You're going to want all this money. I have to make it so that you only get your half, and I protect you.
The full circle. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I would agree. Tuco is, and we learn the most about him. We learn about his childhood. We learn about the laundry list of crimes. We don't know what crimes Blondie has committed, other than impersonating a bounty hunter, and then aiding and abetting a criminal. And he murdered, and they all murder a lot of people.
One of the other things I found interesting with regard to Tuco and is that at the beginning he was always wanted to make sure that his guardian angel really had his back, that he was always going to be there to shoot out the rope from the noose. And yet when he was pulling the same scam with somebody else, Tuco's like, "You're coming with me," and Blondie's like, "Sorry, shorty." So basically Tuco got his guardian angel back by betraying somebody else for pulling the same scam.
Some random person who's essentially in the same position gets totally fucked.
And when Blondie tries to leave him, he calls him Judas.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
Yep. Yeah, they make reference to that. You're right. So I don't have much more to add. I think I agree with most of you guys. Like, yes, the more I would have said it's Blondie and Tuco as a joint protagonist effort, but we certainly do get, for the most part, the movie shows us from Tuco's perspective. So I think that's a good point. That it's almost a little bit more him and his story. And like you said, his guardian angel, Blondie, around him, and then Angel Eyes comes in as sort of the almost like a Terminator kind of factor in a sense, right? But I still think all that is enough for a 1 for me. So
I'm trying to think of how many scenes there were with Blondie without Tuco or Angel Eyes there to witness it.
Only a few, right, Sam?
Yeah, is he maybe just a figment of their imagination?
No, but the idea is that
that would be a twist.
No, I'm not implying that.
Thank you, Christopher Nolan.
But I was saying that Tuco is the really only fleshed out character in this. I mean, we get to see Angel Eyes through his actions and also Blondie, but Tuco's the only one
that's all they
ever
are, you're
really,
saying.
yeah. And you're right. I think I said everything I said when I screwed you up earlier on. So it's Tuco for me for protagonist.
All right. Well, that's one
And,
all around.
and I love this character. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it works really well. All right, so that'll bring me to secondary. So like, I guess like if we agree, like if we called Lee Van Cleef, i.e. the antagonist, like I guess it's all like the townsfolk and like the random like other outlaws who are like I guess a la the first scene, the ones who are like ostensibly about to hunt Tuco down, but he escapes through the window, and like that's your introduction, like a la like, oh, the ugly, it's him, boom, right? And like all the other townsfolk and stuff, like Lee Van Cleef's Angel Eyes is like, I guess, posse, right? Who
The scum outside
Yeah.
of the prison
Yeah,
camp, as
exactly.
the guy one guy says.
Yeah, exactly, Sam. So like, because like picked off one by one. So like, I don't know, like I'm leaning towards like a fine, soft one, like just because like, it fills out the world and like they're there and it's fine, but like they have way less, of course, characterization and things to do in the plot than the characters we just talked about, like the the main featured characters. So yes.
But we brought up earlier the priest. And
he has a fine
but no,
team,
but the
like,
idea if Tuco is the main character of this, and you guys brought the importance of the priest as a character redemption for him, or at least making him a sympathetic. He is an incredibly important character in this.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I mean, I guess I'll give you even the original Bill, whatever, like the actual Confederate soldier with the eye patch who is dying, like, and who Tuco assumes the identity of, like, he's not a fully fleshed out character unto himself, but like you get who he was and what he was about, like even via Angel Eyes' investigations, like his his detective work upon it. So I don't know, like this. I'm just saying, this is the only question of like somewhat wavering upon, but I'll probably settle upon a decent, solid one overall for the aspects we just said. So with that, what do you guys think?
I think if Tuco's a protagonist, then that bumps Blondie over to supporting, and he's a very important supporting character. But to reiterate what Ian said, I think that Tuco's brother, that was an important scene, and it was very, and we've said it.
It fleshes out his character, yeah.
Character-driven, thematically driven film rather than a plot-driven. So obviously without Blondie, but without Tuco's brother, this film would have been diminished. So I'm definitely giving this a solid one.
I'll say that in their interaction with the, I guess he was a captain, right before they go to the bridge.
The bridge part? Yeah.
Yeah. And when I think they're about to go down there, because the captain tells him, like, he's like, I've dreamed about blowing up this bridge, and I would do it right after a battle. Everybody's picking up the dead bodies. And so they see that opportunity, and they realize, because Tuco tells Blondie, hey, we need to cross this river, so we got to stop this. And so anyway, Blondie says to the captain, as he's laying there dying, he says, take a swig of this and keep your ears open. And so then it's like the last thing that guy sees is that goddamn bridge blow up. And then he dies happy. So I feel like that goes to the support that Blondie's a great supporting character. The captain's a great supporting character.
Yes. Okay. I thought that the point you were getting at. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, that's a good point, Sam. Like, I do agree. Like, those little, even though like the ones who were sprinkled throughout, I think the Union captain, even when Angel Eyes goes to the Confederate camp, if you remember, he meets like the drunken captain, or like the captain that he gives the wine to, like to get information of where Bill is, right?
And he complains about the corn cob.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I think you're right. Like, you guys make a good point overall that they all add up to conglomerate into a one, at least for me.
I just realized, if this is an action adventure piece and it has the tropes of action adventure, Angel Eyes has a dragon in this that Tuco defeats.
That's true.
So yeah, it does hit all the tropes.
Yeah,
so that is the one thing, is that Tuco does not win at the end. And in the standoff, Tuco's gun has no bullets.
Because he's not the traditional protagonist of an action adventure. But it's It's almost like the droids in Star Wars, where you're following their plotline, even though they're secondary characters. We're following a secondary character as the main protagonist of the film.
Yeah, he was
It's
fated
interesting,
never
yeah.
to have any bullets ever in his gun, Sam, because of the nature of his character.
Yeah.
But yet he still is there, anyways.
Just
Yeah.
the
Well,
bullets.
sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
He said his guardian angel had the bullets.
He's dead.
Right. So I think that's ones all around for that, and that'll bring us to dialogue, and that'll be you, Ian.
I was impressed at moments by the dialogue. I don't remember anything off the top of my head because even though I watched this yesterday,
I remember a few.
Overall, especially Tuco, and I think you mentioned this pre-cast when we were talking. Like Blondie almost has the Schwarzenegger lines, type things.
He's Proto Schwarzenegger. Like, he's got one-liners, you know?
But overall, like I felt it was heartfelt when it needed to be. It's partly a comedy film, so it was funny at points. I think it hit
It's got comedic parts.
the stylistic dialogue that it wanted to for the scenes that it had, and I'm gonna give it a 1.
That's fair. What do you guys think?
Give it a 1. So, I mean, the only weak dialogue is with some of the like real ancillary characters, or they're just plot devices to like, you know,
Yeah.
get the next clue to Angel Eyes or somebody to
good point.
catch a bullet. And you know, they say, you know, some fairly predictable and unimaginative things, but I love any film that has a lot of brevity, that eliminates a lot of unnecessary dialogue. You know, it just kind of just gives you just enough to kind of follow the conversation and you see where they're going. And this movie does that a lot. And I even think that there's even a lot of scenes where I actually really enjoy that there isn't more dialogue.
Thank you. Yes. I was going to bring that up if you didn't. And so the first 5 minutes of the film, I think something like that, like nobody says a fucking word.
10 minutes and 30 seconds in.
Yeah.
I
right,
actually
Sam?
timed it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like it's even longer than that. It's just body expressions essentially, right? Like it's just like close up, like Sergio cuts to his famous close-ups, right? Nobody's saying the motherfucking word, but you get exactly what's going on. So I think that's a big credit to the dialogue. And again, like you guys said, even when the spoken dialogue is happening, like one of my favorite parts is when there's 3 like random bounty hunters, I guess, cornering Tuco in the desert, and like, oh, you're worth $2,000, and Blondie goes, yeah, but you're not be the ones who are going to collect on that, right? Like it's like shit like that, right? So I think
Blondie's best line is when he leaves Tuco in the desert and he says, it's like 70 miles to the next town, but I feel like a man of your character holds or like saves his breath. He could manage it.
You'll make it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. So I think 80% of the time it works, and I'm going to give it a pretty solid, okay 1.
Actually, if I remember correctly, I have a factoid here.
Okay.
Or I'm just lying. So, but in the original Fistful of Dollars, Clint Eastwood actually removed a bunch of his lines from his character to give it more mystery, and thus they gave him less and less dialogue as it progressed because of the character he developed for it.
So it adds in the mystery. Yeah, and I think that works. Like again, like yeah, like just like the composure, like the looks they give each other is a type of dialogue, even if they're not saying anything, right?
Body languages.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the looks and it's the hands
Yeah.
inching closer to the holster. There's a lot of that. And that's where you discover that Lee Van Cleef is actually missing the tip of one of his fingers, which is an interesting aside.
Yep. Good factoid. What do you think, Chris?
I didn't actually notice that part about Lee Van Cleef, but I also do realize now the weakest part of the film was the one that had the least amount of intimate conversations, for lack of a better word. Like, I mean, the whole north-south subplot that was something that the characters went through. It was really kind of, ancillary. It was just connective tissue to get you there. Any 2 people talking or any of the 3 main characters talking, I may not have always remembered the lines, but I found it very engaging.
But you remember the intent, I guess, maybe I want to say to you.
Intent, but again, it was not just what was said, but how it was said, how it was shot. There's a lot that backs up this dialogue, and there's a lot that the dialogue backs up.
Actually, I do have. I just remembered on this. There's a lot of binary worldviews in this. Tuco is the first one to do it, where he says there are two types of men in the world.
He says that a bunch.
Yeah, but it's the idea, which is interesting, because that's generally a very black and white view of the world. For such a gray, actual look at ethics, the fact that they view the world very binary is an interesting juxtaposition
between what it was. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good point, and I think that's a good credit for dialogue. So it sounds like we're all giving it ones on that front. All right.
I was just going to say, Blondie also continues the binary at the end when he says there's two types of men: those with guns, bullets in their guns, and those who dig.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so it all calls back. It all does a good, like, almost brick reference joke, if you will. Like, not even joke, like just brick references in terms
running
of running
gags.
Yeah,
I would say.
Exactly. All right, so it sounds like one's all around. All right, Sammy boy, tell us about the fucking style of Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
I mean, so we've already talked about a lot of the dialogue, that there's no wasted dialogue. There's some scenes where there's no dialogue. I mean, first 10 minutes, it's all just shooting and looks.
Yep.
Obviously, the music. The music allows those scenes where it's just looks, especially at the end, and the Mexican standoff. I mean, that scene, they're just looking at each other for so long, and the music is just building and building and building, and it's just to the point where by the time they finally shoot, you're just like, oh, somebody do something, ah! And then then it happens, you're like, my God, there's a noose. Why? But yeah, it builds you up, but it doesn't. There's some times where it explains itself a little bit with some of the lower characters, but it's just like pulls you through this, and you don't even really know, especially if it's your first time watching it, you're not going to really understand everything that's going on, but you just know that these guys are cool. The music is just puts you in a trance, and the whole thing. You don't know who's good, who's bad. You just I want to see what happens, because everything is just so engaging.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. So the whole point is, I don't think I mentioned it at the outset, but I will now, that the reason we're doing this film, on top of other reasons, that Ennio Morricone, who was a composer of these tracks, passed away about a month or two ago. So, and in terms of that, the music he composed for this film specifically might be some of the most iconic things ever. Like, wah, 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 wah. That's the main theme of Good, Bad, and the Ugly. And there's also a piece called Ecstasy of Gold, which when they get to the graveyard where the gold is buried, right? So yes, of course, it's iconic, and you just can't escape it. Even if you've never seen this film, you almost certainly have heard a piece of music from it. Like, you can't escape it, because it was just so iconic and just reverberated throughout pop culture ever since. So I'm going to pass it to Chris in a second, but just that's on top of everything else. Like, and even like Sergio Leone, of course, is a legendary, like, this is his probably iconic opus. Yeah. What?
Really?
Isn't that what I said? Sorry.
Yeah,
Sergio Leone. Ennio Morricone and Sergio Leone.
Yes,
the Italian masters of the spaghetti western. One director, writer, one the composer. No, seriously, this is their opus, and it is recognized as such, as you point what a spaghetti western was, and it has all the elements, and everything that came after it couldn't help but pull from it in some way or another, even to I would say Tarantino certainly of course used shit like this, fucking Guy Ritchie, shit like that, right?
Kill Bill has it a lot.
Exactly. You can all point back to this film, spaghetti westerns, and especially Good Bad, for that reason. And again, given that we're doing Salute to Ennio, I will pass it now to Chris to speak about the music, the composure of that as such. Go ahead, my friend.
First of all, the music, I can't remember the name of the music now, when Tuco's running around the graveyard.
Ecstasy of Gold is the name of the track.
I used for a beer commercial. But I have to comment on how incredibly amazing, how well shot that fucking scene is. It is just incredible. In a film of incredible shots, that one's great. And I have to say, after watching this, every Tarantino film after Jackie Brown is slightly diminished, because it's just I know where you were going for,
Mhm.
but you were trying too hard. Yeah, the music, Ennio Morricone is one of the great film composers ever.
Legendary.
I like the fact that I'm not familiar with all of his work, but I know enough of it that he's kind of more of a minimalist composer. I mean, like if you listen to this soundtrack, it's really not much to it. My favorite piece of the music out of all this great music is that guitar, like the da no no, that just kind of punctuates things. Ennio Morricone, just some incredible stuff. I was telling the guys precast that I went out and ran out and bought the Electro Harmonix Ocean's 11 reverb pedal because I just couldn't take it anymore.
Can do a cover of it.
No, I'm not even going to be that. But I have a Telecaster. It's not a Stratocaster or a Jazzmaster, which I think they used the Jazzmaster in this. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe in a Jaguar. Not important. Important thing is the music. Because there is I meant to look it up before this. There is I think Reverb does a guitar workshop why Western music is so cool, and Ennio Morricone, and he talks about like the reverb and so forth. And I love the sparsity of the music, which makes it more impactful when you have a scene at the end where Tuco gets to the graveyard and you've got something more, and you have the women doing the I'm not gonna
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sing it.
It's like a ritualistic scream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just he knew exactly when to throw his cards on the table.
Yeah. He was like
Little bits,
laser targeting precise.
little bits. And once we get to this part in the movie, he and Sergio Leone just crafted this incredible scene. And I also love, real quick before I pass on to somebody else, I love the way this film opened. I love the way it shows up. They just full screen this one guy's face, and they just kind of like, and like all the, like, I think everybody who's shown at the beginning ends up dying right away anyway. I just love the way this film is shot. I mean, there's, as I said, pay homage what you will, but if you go too far, you're going to kind of trying too hard. So,
Well, the long shot landscapes and the close-ups on individual, very classic Sergio. What's fascinating about this is, one, critics didn't like this when it first came out because they had fatigue from spaghetti westerns, but this is one of, if not the best of the spaghetti westerns in retrospect.
Yeah.
But to bring up the idea of the people stealing from this, sometimes you watch films that the use of it later on diminishes that the initial one, because the Orson Welles actually with like Citizen Kane, like a lot of what he used seems
passe at this time.
Yeah, because it's been used. This holds up in every aspect of what people tried to steal. This still is impactful.
I agree. Yeah, you can homage it, spiritually successor it, but the original still fucking stands. I totally agree. Like, yeah, I mean, like that was like it put him on the map. Like, the juxtaposition, I guess I want to say, between like the huge overarching shots, the planes and stuff, and then like intense close-ups of everyone, like their eyes and like just under the hat and like dueling and stuff. And yeah, and on top of the soundtrack, of course, which the motif like plays throughout in the perfect moments. It's like laser precisioned when the moment it needs to be, it is there. And especially, of course, at the ending, like the standoff between three of them, like that is legit iconic, and you can escape it. And yeah, so I don't see how you can not give style a 1.
Yeah. As we spent the most time on this, I actually think the style is what has kept this in people's memories.
Yeah, I would largely agree with that, and looks like we're all giving styles a very strong 1. Go ahead, Chris.
I just want to say one thing. When I say that, like, the later Tarantino films where he really, really kind of went for this aesthetic, oh my God, I had a point to this. Sorry. Oh shit! I lost my train of thought. Forget it.
No problem.
Well, I was
You
gonna
know,
say like,
I was going to say, just to that point of Quentin Tarantino stealing from this, if you rewatch Kill Bill and you rewatch Good, Bad, and the Ugly, the same exact music that Sergio or Ennio Morricone used and Sergio Leone used to introduce Angel Eyes, Quentin Tarantino uses that exact same music to introduce Bill.
Yep.
And I think it's the guitar riff that Chris was talking about,
Hmm.
where it's boom, gong, gong,
Yeah.
gong, gong,
Yep.
gong,
I know
gong,
exactly what you mean. Like,
yeah,
I cannot like I'm not a musical person, but I know like I can hear it in my
I am certainly not.
yeah in my head.
myself.
Sam, yeah, exactly. And like actually, so just to cap off, at least for my cap off, is like we discussed this like we're hanging out with I was hanging out with you, Sam, a couple weeks ago in Kill Bill 2 when the bride breaks out of the grave or like when she's buried into it. It's the same exact rip or the theme song to an actual spaghetti western that was only in Italian. I think it's called the Mercenary. Right? It's the same fucking thing. Soundtrack. Tarantino just straight up used it to match to that scene, but originally it was an Ennio composition from 1972 or whatever that film was out. But yeah, so I think it all comes. Go ahead, Chris. Do you remember what you want to say?
Do you remember what I was gonna say? When you have something like the video game Red Dead Redemption, with I'm gonna say they took some screenshots and mocapped it because there are certain things where I'm like, I know where this road goes. But the thing about Leone is with this film is I can see in a lot of other music and a lot of films the influence of this, and it's much more subtle.
It is far and wide ranging. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is much more subtle where you get like that's where you got that scene was. It's a different difference of paying homage and getting inspiration rather than trying to recreate a scene giving your narrative. And I think that's the point I was trying to get to with regard to,
Yep. I feel you. And that is a solid point. So let's bring it on home. It's on you, Chris. Do you recommend The Good, Bad, and the Ugly?
God damn, I recommend this movie because I want to go back and rewatch it, but I am going to definitely take Sam's advice and watch it in 2 different sittings. Because I did admittedly, it took a lot longer to watch this film because I kept rewinding it and wanting to see certain scenes and certain camera angles and certain bits of dialogue. The film is just, if there's any faults in it, they're diminished.
Minor at best.
Period of time I felt like was diminished, more than made up for the double amount of time, the parts I love that I kept rewinding. I am definitely want to watch this again, and I want to go back and watch all those other films and watch the Kurosawa films upon which these are based. No, it is a gem of a film. I love it. I would love to go back and watch this right now. So.
Well, I intended to split up this into multiple views, and I watched the entire thing through. I know its reputation. I've seen scenes, especially the ending scene of it, and I was enthralled the entire time. I think this is my favorite of the trilogy, even though they're not the same characters throughout, but it's just kind of a spiritual connection. I might like Pale Rider a little bit better, but overall, this is a tremendous work. It should be seen. I would say be on the AFI, but it's an Italian film, so that's off. But overall, I think this is one of the best of the westerns.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you speak last, Sam. So yeah, of course I'm recommending. I'll be brief. Yes. Given that I have never seen this film all the way through, I've seen parts of it and parts of the other 2 trilogies that make up the trilogy. They almost like blur together. But having watched it front to back, yeah, it's an amazing film. It holds up. It's an epic western. Again, like we said, possibly the most quintessential and iconic one. And yeah, you should see it. It's amazing, as for all the reasons we just said. And I'll pass it on to you, sir.
Yeah, I would highly recommend this. I mean, this is the best Western of all time. Any Western that does better, it would have to build upon what this Western did. So it would not be able to do it. I mean, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I do not believe it would be possible to do that without taking something from this film, or probably taking a lot of things from this film. And like Ian had said earlier, it was the first one that didn't have a polished, absolute, straight cut, he's the hero, he's John Wayne, he's Roy Rogers, everybody's kind of gray, although Blondie's the best. He is he's the only one who shows that he's actually willing to split the $200,000, which is not that great, because I mean, $100,000 in 1865 or whatever year that it's not really clear what year it is, but I mean, it's a lot of money.
I take $100,000 right now.
Yeah.
Still a lot of money, dude. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the moral gray areas, the fact that the commentary on war. I think the most of when Tuco's being carried off to be executed, and some Union soldier makes some comment, and he says, "This head's worth $3,000. I bet you they didn't give you a penny for your arm." Just like the whole, what a waste this war is. You guys are a bunch of suckers. At least we're doing this for ourselves. It kind of it actually was very Americana in that, and that it's this whole, work for yourself. You work hard, you get to play hard. And so, yeah, and the best thing I can say about it is if somebody were to say, "Hey, Sam, I'll give you an infinite budget, remake this movie," there is very little I would change, other than the dialogue would match up with people's lips.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah, you can definitely tell who.
And even in terms of
He's Italian.
I noticed that, Sam, but it didn't really distract at all. I've seen films that distracted me a lot more than that. I think that's, to your point, a big credit to that point.
Yeah.
Grew up on kaiju movies and Italian horror.
Yeah. I know you like that shit too, Chris.
It took me a while to notice it, but yeah, it was just oh, whoever did the ADR on this,
Yeah, but yeah, so I think that will do it. Looks like we gave it all a 9 for exactly the same reason. We took off just a minor point for plot. Everything else is spot on. We all gave it credit on many fronts because, yeah, as we said, it's basically if you're gonna point to what's the quintessential most spaghetti western film ever, it's this one probably, for many of the various reasons we pointed out.
In fact, I think in a lot of people's mind, you qualify for spaghetti western. I think this is
or even that, yeah,
one of the most.
They might not even
westerns.
know. You're right. They might not even know it's a spaghetti western, but they know it as such. It's so iconic, and specifically as our salute to Ennio, R.I.P. our departed friend. But just because of all those reasons, just the way it's pulled off is just so incredible. Still stands the test of time. And like you said, Sam, anything that tries you're gonna have to pull heavily from this film in order to try to improve upon that. So good luck with all that. But if you do it, cool. But you will this film and all the people who were involved in making it. Yeah. So any final thoughts, boys, before we
The atmosphere is so great in this film. You just want to wrap it up like a quilt around you. It's just, that's all I want to say about it.
Indeed. So yeah. So thank you so much for joining us.
I don't want Tuco wrapped around me like you're called.
No.
Or maybe you do. You never know.
All right, without all the dead bodies, let's just take music and make a quilt out of that.
Well, anyway, thanks for joining us. We've been viewing Good, Bad, and the Ugly. I've been Scott Thurlow. We shall ride off into the sunset with my fellow compatriots, Chris Morgan.
Have a good night, everybody.
And Jonathan Ian Manzo.
The actual translation is the good, the ugly, and the bad.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And good friend of the show and of us, Sam Marty. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yep. Cheers. We'll see you next time. Good night.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?